You're listening to the Apple Insider Podcast.
Welcome to this, your Apple Insider Podcast. I'm Victor Marks, and joining me is Neil Hughes, and this is episode 151. Welcome.
Victor, how's it going?
It's excellent. How are you?
Doing all right.
Good as ever. I'm going to start right off with a topic that's a little interesting for us. Have you gotten your workout in?
Not today. I'm more
Have
of
you gone to the gym lately?
I do go to the gym, but I'm more of an evening workout guy.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, is your gym by any chance the Lifetime Athletic at Sky?
No, mine is the YMCA.
Ah, okay. Well, you know, the YMCA is good. It's memorialized in a song.
It is.
So you're
It's
good
a good
there.
community center. I'm a fan of supporting that.
Is.
So
Absolutely. The reason why I ask about Lifetime is that the Lifetime at Sky at 605 West 42nd has 13 compatible Techno gym machines that are compatible with GymKit. Now, help our listeners out here, because maybe not all of you know. What is GymKit? What's the best explanation of GymKit?
GymKit is an expansion of the use of NFC. Apple has had NFC chips in the iPhone and Apple Watch for a few years now, but it's just been limited to Apple Pay and some uses around that. They have slowly been opening it up, but in ways that are kind of unclear. Supposedly developers are able to tap into it, but we don't really know. But there's other stuff in the Apple Watch, like Bluetooth and what do they call it? ANT for
ANT Plus, yeah.
ANT Plus for syncing of fitness data and stuff. And so Apple is tapping into all those sensors to allow devices to automatically connect. So if you've ever been to a gym where they have the ability to plug in your phone or do something like that, you know, it can be kind of cumbersome, kind of confusing. The idea behind GymKit is to make it simple so that if you have a device that, for example, is more accurately tracking what you're doing, like running on a treadmill, the watch can kind of guesstimate how fast you're running and how far you've run, but there's no way they can really know because there's no distance to track when you're just moving on a treadmill. So GymKit would be a way for that data to be more accurately transferred to the watch, or health data in terms of like sensors, you know, heart rate, those sorts of things. Any measurable data, you know, you're on a bike, you have your hands on the heart rate sensor, you know, maybe that's more accurate than what would be on your wrist with the watch. So it's just a way for that kind of data to be more easily transferred between devices. And it just makes the Apple Watch a more central part of a health ecosystem.
Right. So GymKit is compatible with currently ellipticals, treadmills, stationary bikes, and stair climbers. And, you know, with a bike computer, one of the things that's being tracked is your revolutions as your pedals go around, right? As you drive the crank around. And the Apple Watch doesn't really get a good read on that necessarily, although, you know, you can get some of that. But if it's pairing with Ant Plus on traditional bike computers, or if it's pairing with GymKit on a stationary bike, you get a much more precise resolution of data.
Yeah, so I like to run outside, and obviously I get pretty good data with my Apple Watch Series 3 because it's got cellular, GPS, all that stuff that can triangulate my location and get it pretty accurate. But when I go to the gym, I get on a stationary bike, and there's no way for it to know any data beyond you started the workout at this time, your heart rate got up to this level, and we estimate based on the data you put in with your weight and age and all that you burned X number of calories. But that data is not very accurate. I mean, it's accurate enough, I think, for most people. What does it really matter whether you burned 250 or 275 calories, you know? But obviously, if you're a very serious training person who, you know, maybe you're training for a marathon or you know, an Ironman competition or something like that, you would want to get that more detailed information from the stationary bike in a way that you can't just get from the built-in workout app. And so to make it seamless to have that data transfer over is a good thing, but it's going to take some time, as evidenced by the fact that it's only available in one gym in the entire United States.
And North America.
And a rooftop Manhattan gym, no less. You know, it's one of those things I was like, man, maybe I'll go check it out. And then I looked into it, I was like, nope, won't be going to check that out. But, you know, hopefully soon it will come. It's really going to depend on gyms and their eagerness to update their equipment or retrofit old equipment to make it work with this. I think this is something that in 5 years might be a big deal, but don't hold your breath.
Well, what I'm looking at is there's sort of a progression, right? Just as when you have a luxury car, the luxury car gets features first as options, then as standard, and then they start to become apparent on more affordable models.
Right.
That this is the kind of thing where it rolls out at these premium locations. There's the Lifetime Athletic at Skye, there's a Virgin Active gym in London, and there's an Australian branch of Fitness First. And so you've got 3 gyms across 3 continents. Mm-hmm. At some point, this becomes more widespread. As you say, it's either retrofitted or gyms refresh their equipment. At some point, and this is where I'm looking in the 5 years, is that it becomes an option or a standard part of equipment that you buy for your home. Maybe you buy a rowing machine or you buy a stationary bike for your house, or you've got a treadmill in your house, which is a pretty common thing in North America. There are plenty of people who do. That your home equipment gets this GymKit.
Yeah, I think that that's an inevitability as well. And it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to that day, but I don't think it's going to be coming anytime soon. Just because, how many gyms have you been to where they still have the 30 pin for the original iPod?
Neil, I haven't set foot in a gym ever.
Well, you might want to work on that.
That's a different problem. No, I've got a rowing machine here at the house.
That's good. Yeah, when you go to gyms, they typically have older equipment there. And even when they buy new stuff, for some reason, it still all has the 30-pin connector on it, and none of them come with lightning connectors. Now what they'll do is they'll just have a generic USB port where you can bring your own cable and plug it in. But because Lightning doesn't do video over Lightning to USB, you have lost the video out capabilities of old iPods. So my wife at one point was actually taking an old iPod Nano, loading it up with shows from iTunes, and using that to watch it on the screen. Because they have like a nice, LCD screen on the treadmill, and she was using that to watch TV shows at the gym because her iPhone can't do it. So that is an area where Apple was doing pretty well, and they kind of blew it. I don't know how much they care. I don't know how much it really matters in the end. But it is something where the switch to Lightning did take a step backwards. So hopefully we start to see things go in the right direction, not just in terms of GymKit, but in terms of opening up NFC in the iPhone and the Apple Watch and everything else. I've been saying for years on this podcast that, Apple needs to get to a point where all their devices communicate better. There's no reason that my watch does not talk to my Mac,
I hear you.
Or my iPad. Like, especially now that the watch has LTE, it has its own Wi-Fi radio in it. You and I heard a few months ago from a listener, and I thought it was pretty interesting, and it was a use case that I didn't consider. It was a guy who shared a iPhone with his wife because they don't need 2 phones. They're always together, you get messages, take phone calls, whatever. But they both wanted to wear the Apple Watch, and you can't have 2 watches at once connected with an iPhone.
Right, you can switch them out if you have your daytime watch and then your nighttime rose gold, whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you have 2 users, that doesn't work.
Yeah, and maybe that example is a little hyper specific and wouldn't apply to the vast majority of people, but it does raise the question, why can't you connect an Apple Watch to an iPad? Why isn't there a health app for iPad or for Mac?
And it's not a wrong question, and it's not that unusual or strange a request, because if you think about it, right, the watch is becoming more and more independent every day, right? It's got LTE. You need to have an iPhone to activate it, but otherwise it can be out there in the world pretty much doing its thing.
Yeah, this is just like when the iPad launched. You needed to initially connect it to a Mac or a PC to get it going. And then eventually it became its own computing platform, and you can set it up now without connecting it to a computer. But that was a not so subtle way of Apple to signal to consumers, hey, you may want to use this to replace your computer, but we're not quite there yet. And eventually they got there. And I think that the watch is heading in the same direction. And I think that inevitably you will be able to use a watch independently of a phone entirely. But they clearly don't think that the capabilities of the battery life are there right now. But I question that in some ways, because if you're the type of person who is at home most of the time, you're a retiree, or you're like me, you work from home, you're connected to your own home Wi-Fi all the time anyhow. And so in that situation, your phone doesn't need to be tethered to your watch. Your watch can connect directly to Wi-Fi. As long as if you you need a parent device for it to sync data to for health and that sort of stuff. Fine. Why not an iPad? Why not a Mac? Why not a PC? And not only that, why not use the same tools that they're using in GymKit to have NFC, have these devices just talk to each other in a way that works a little bit more seamlessly than it does right now. This switching.
It would be really nuts. And this would never happen. I say that knowing that the things that we said would never happen have happened, like
right.
iTunes on the PC, for example. But what if your Apple Watch could synchronize with or activate with your Android phone?
Yeah, that's one that's come up, and there are hacks to get it to work where you put your or your Android phone in like a tethering mode, and then it uses the data from it. I don't see why not. It's like, yeah, this is a crazy idea. It's designed to drive iPhone sales, blah blah blah. But
it's designed to work with Apple Health, not Google Fit. There are all the kinds of details there. But if the idea is that we are in a post-PC era, then these mobile devices eventually stand on their own, and they could drive people to move to iOS or move to an iPhone.
Yeah, I agree with that logic. The thing that makes Apple stand out and the thing that makes people like their products so much is they're such a joy to use, right? It's a fun experience. It's pleasurable. It's something you can rely on. And they proudly, for years, well before the iPhone, when the iPod was around, were talking about how it had a halo effect, how it drove Mac sales because people were introduced to Apple products through the iPod, and they said, this thing's pretty great. I want to get a Mac. And that was a proven effect. Mac sales continually grew, and it only got better with the iPhone, and obviously the iPad has benefited from that as well.
Do you remember what the iPod was like before there was iTunes for PC?
Not a great experience.
So, well, in 2002, the iPod debuted, and in 2003, it started to catch on. And at this time, it was only supported with iTunes on Mac.
Right.
And there
was FireWire and had a physical click wheel on it.
It was FireWire with a physical and then a touch wheel.
Yeah, they quickly got rid of the physical turning wheel.
Yeah, the physical wheel moves to the second gen that was the touch wheel.
Yeah.
But what happened is that I worked in an Apple store. I worked in the streets of South Point Apple store back in 2002, 2003, briefly. And the shelves had Belkin PCI FireWire cards so that people who owned PCs could come in and buy a FireWire card with their iPod and then use software that Apple did not create called Music Match. Mm-hmm. And Music Match allowed your iPod to synchronize with your Dell. And we had to go through and explain to people who were coming in to buy an iPod that you also need to buy this $50 PCI card and install it in your PC, and we don't do that for you. And it was a really awkward time on this path to getting people to have that halo effect.
Yeah, and people thought hell, would freeze over before iTunes would come to the PC, and it happened. We eventually, at some point, got
handing a glass of ice water to the guy in hell, basically.
we eventually, for some reason, got Safari on the PC, which was interesting and somewhat short-lived in hindsight. But it's not unprecedented. So could we see Apple Watch connect in some way? Even basic, like not getting notifications necessarily from your Android phone, but just tapping into his data or something. Why not? Why not?
Tapping to the data seems the easy one. Tapping into, the thing to do would be to load your email accounts over and have your text messages transfer over, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and that actually is an interesting one because we have another story that I know we didn't talk about before we started doing this, but there is a hack that we covered on the site about using your Mac to push iMessage to an Android phone. Because, iMessages and iMessage have been solely an iOS phenomenon.
And they will remain as such. I see more reason to make the Apple Watch connect to an Android phone than I do to bring iMessage to Android.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just thinking that in terms of being able to move data around or have data go to different places, that it's certainly something Apple could do if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, this app...
They could certainly make an Apple Watch functional and activate and bring over your accounts from an Android device if they chose to.
Well, they already have tools to do that kind of stuff, to migrate from Android to iOS. You can download it from Apple's website. So, I mean, they're...
from play.google.
Well, yeah, they have... And they also... You can get Apple Music on your Android device. So, it's not it's not unheard of. And honestly, it would be one of the best things that they could do for Apple Watch sales. But the way to do it wouldn't be to make it about Android. It would be just to say that it is now kind of platform agnostic, in the same way that you can use an iPad and tether it to your Android device on the go or something like that. The experience is not as seamless, but it works. And so I don't see any. I don't think it's that crazy of an idea. I think that it eventually could happen. But GymKit is a great start for this kind of stuff. I'm excited to see NFC capabilities open up more to third-party developers on the Apple Watch and on the iPhone. There's no reason that we can't securely have, for example, building access or public transit capabilities tapping into the NFC chip on an iPhone to make it so you can tap to enter your building or tap to pay for the bus or the subway or whatever. And iOS 11 has supposedly paved the groundwork for that, but we haven't seen any third-party apps that have taken advantage of it. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, if developers are dragging their feet or if Apple has kind of gimped it a little bit. But GymKit is an in-house way of them expanding the hardware capabilities and what they can do and the extensibility of NFC. So I'm hopeful that in the next few years we start to see that expand more. Some of that stuff's kind of gimmicky. It's been on Android for years, and Apple played a little bit with that kind of stuff with Bluetooth and iBeacon. And I don't know how well that is going to appeal to general consumers, but if anybody's going to do it in a way that makes it accessible and makes it relevant, Apple's going to be the company to do it.
Absolutely. Well, I like the idea of iOS fitness connected things. Like I said, I've got this rowing machine, and my rowing machine is connected to an iOS app called Live Rowing. So I get the same kinds of real-time stats that we write off the rowing machine into the app. And that's something that I've been doing for a while. We should put that up on the site.
I see a lot of, I think that would be a great piece for the site. I see a lot of commercials now for Peloton. Have you seen that?
Yes, Peloton. So Peloton is something I saw at CES last year, and a little bit before CES, actually. And it's a stationary bike that you can either use it with an iPad or you can use it with their big giant touchscreen that they have built into the bikes. And you subscribe and you get live streaming lessons from coaches. And you get to share your stats with other riders, sort of like you'd get in an MMORPG, a real role-playing game kind of thing. You see everyone else's stats on your team. Gamifying it. But the coaching and the setting of the bike's resistance and things so that you're really taking advantage of the coached lesson instead of just getting on and hope that you're doing it right is a kind of a huge thing. And I was looking at this from how can I do things on the cheap kind of standpoint? There are all kinds of ways that you can hang Arduino and ANT sensors on a traditional stationary bike and use Peloton's lessons over iPad and accomplish the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, they've been advertising like crazy. So I
can we request one?
I have a 500 square foot apartment. I can't fit one in here.
Can I put in a review request for that?
If you got the room for it, put it next to your rowing machine. Sure, I'll be at the Y.
Absolutely, we can do that. Let's move away from Android Insider and Fitness Insider and talk a little bit about Phil Schiller.
Okay.
And specifically what Phil Schiller had to say. So, Senior Vice President of Worldwide Marketing, Phil Schiller, been with Apple all the way through the Steve Jobs revival, the rebirth of Apple from 1997 forward. He has been going around on a media tour talking about all things Apple, and his latest interview talked about some of their thought processes, why they decided to move away from Touch ID across the board, and he commented on the HomePod as well. This is interesting. They're the classic Apple kinds of quotes that he gave. The kind of thing where they know when it's time to leave something behind and go towards something that's the future. His quote was, "This is an exciting moment when you have to sort of the old saying, burn the boats, leave the past behind and commit. Knowing that the team was willing to make that gamble was a key point early enough in the process." So
we still don't even know why the HomePod was delayed. Is this something to do with the hardware? Is it something to do with the software? So I was curious this week because Google started shipping their Home Max, which is about as direct a competitor as you're going to get to the HomePod does the same sort of, adjusting its audio in the room. It has built-in Chromecast capabilities, Google Cast or whatever they call it, so that you can beam from your iPhone or your Android device music to it. It does personal assistant stuff, and it's a high-end speaker. And it costs $50 more than the HomePod. So I was curious, and I reached out to a bunch of speaker makers that are announced to be supporting AirPlay 2 to see if they had anything to say. And I was hoping that I could get some sort of an indication as to whether maybe AirPlay 2 was the hang-up, and maybe that's why they haven't shipped the HomePod. But everybody's still tight-lipped, and so that suggests to me that that they're still in the dark and they don't really know. I think that Apple hasn't really told partners anything beyond AirPlay 2 is coming. And whether that is because there's some sort of an issue with it or just because they don't want other manufacturers to get their speakers out before the HomePod, I don't know. But it is still a perplexing thing that they could not ship this speaker.
Yeah, so Phil's quote was, "It's really very simple. It's a brand new product. There's a lot of engineering to make it be the product that we've described and for it to be all that we hope it can be."
That's all meaningless dribble.
Well, there are a couple perspectives, right? That you can say that that's meaningless, but at the same time, you can say that that's indicative. You can read the tea leaves a little and say that's indicative of a manufacturing or engineering problem, or you can go ahead and say it's a software issue, like you said earlier, where we've seen them have software issues lately with 11.2, with High Sierra, so there must have been some crippling software thing going on with HomePod to delay it. Or they knew how much else they had to do with High Sierra to get it working before they could do HomePod. Just devoting
whatever it is. I have very high hopes and high expectations for the HomePod whenever it ships. I think it's going to be a good product.
Especially now that they've delayed it.
It better be, right?
He just said that it's going to take a lot of engineering to make it be the product they've described and for what they want it to be. So now your expectations should be even higher.
And they can spin it however they want, and supporters of the company can justify it however they want. But at the end of the day, Apple announced they would ship a product at a certain time frame, and they failed to do it. And that is a blemish for the company, one that prides itself in not pre-announcing products in that way. They did, and they didn't ship on time.
This is not an unrecoverable blemish.
No, definitely not.
All they have to do is ship. Definitely
not, but they're going to lose out on a lot of holiday sales, so...
I think they've already come to terms with that.
Yeah, obviously they have, but I think that ship sailed a while ago. And how many Google Home Maxes are they going to sell at $399? I don't know. I can't imagine
one.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's going to be a hot seller. So this is not a disaster, but I think that, as we've talked about before, while they're not direct competitors, I think a lot of cheap Alexas and Google Home Minis will be sold as a result of this, because people are going to look at it and go, $30, what do I get to lose? I was going to get a HomePod, but I'll try it out.
So Google's plan is this, right? Amazon's plan is they want Alexa in everything everywhere.
Right.
And Google is trying to follow that recipe because it's been very good for Amazon so far.
Right.
But Google's plan has, for the longer period of time, been that they want Google Cast in everything, everywhere. And that's why they have Google Cast in all of Vizio's TVs. That's why they have it in Samsung and Sony's. That's why they have it in every speaker that they've got here, from the smallest mini up to this Max thing, because they like the idea of you being able to do whole house audio on the cheap. That's why the Google Cast for audio is $30, right? And the regular Chromecast for video is also $30, because if you have these things and then you add one Google Home Mini, you have the ability to say with a voice command and play audio or play video and the audio all across your house. It's a really powerful thing, and it's very affordable comparatively.
And it's a weakness right now for Apple. And so that's why you see Google and Amazon pushing so hard in that space, because it's a place where they feel like they can get a leg up on the biggest name in consumer technology.
And that's something that Google's tried for in the past and had a little bit of a difficult time pulling off.
Yeah, let's not forget, Google's new to the hardware game. They've partnered with some companies here and there and done some stuff, but Android's success has been on the back of Samsung. And Amazon, while not as new to the hardware game, has had some minor success in iPad competitors, very cheap ones. Had a disaster of a time trying to get into the smartphone business. And they've done well with Kindle. And I guess they've done well with Echo. We don't know any sales figures or anything like that. But
I would say that, like you suspect, right? It's the The Echo Dot, the small one, the affordable one.
The cheap one. That was the best seller on Black Friday is what they said. So
without telling you what bestseller means.
Amazon and Amazon and Google have a lot in common there because they are two companies that desperately want to get into the consumer hardware space, and they want to compete with Apple directly, but they are picking their battles because, I mean, let's be real. The Google Pixel, pretty well received. People generally like it. They're never going to sell as many Google Pixels as Apple sells iPhones ever. In a million years, they never will. True. So, I mean, that they want to get in that space. They want to sell some phones, but that ship has sailed. I mean, Microsoft got kicked out of this market. Come on. One of the biggest companies on the planet couldn't compete. Google has a foot in the door with the platform, so they're going to continue to tread water there and try to push the Pixel, but they're never going to compete with the iPhone. And so they see speakers as a place where they can not only compete with Apple, but maybe beat them. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of investment by Google and Amazon in that space.
It is very easy to lose a lot of money doing hardware.
Yeah.
It is not hard because you have a lot of upfront costs, right? You have to do your engineering, you have to do your tooling, you have to do your manufacturing, all before you ever make a sale.
Right.
It is not hard to burn a ton of money.
Yeah, and how many $1,000 Chromebooks do you really think Google is selling? And I'm sure their hardware on those is fine. I'm sure they're decent products, but I mean, how many are they really selling? Come on.
I mean, some of that stuff is to show that it can be done and show the way for what the third parties ought to be making.
Right.
The touchscreen Pixel book that also runs Android apps in Chrome is an interesting idea, but the vast majority of Chromebook sales are the $200 and $300 Toshibas and Fujitsus.
When we're talking about Google and when we're talking about Amazon, we're talking about cheap stuff that sells.
And they're Chromebooks there's a good reason for them. They're great at being the machine that if it breaks, you throw it away and buy another one because all you have to do is sign in and all your stuff comes back.
And I am convinced that the success of the Chromebook is one of the reasons that Apple got so aggressive on the iPad pricing this year with the $330 entry-level iPad, which I think is the best value in Apple's entire product lineup. That thing is awesome.
It is, but the issue is managing the device. When an education buyer goes ahead and buys a bunch of Chromebooks for a class and one breaks, they throw it out and they give the kid another one to sign into and they're done.
Right.
With iOS, with iPads, they have to do MDM, they have to do a ton of stuff for this, and it's a real issue. It's a real hard thing to go ahead and deal with all of that stuff comparatively.
Yeah.
So, and that ignores the whole issue of curriculum. You have to have a curriculum designed around the tools that are present on each of those platforms so that you actually take advantage of them.
Right.
That was the problem way back when, it was Enrico County, Virginia, that bought tons of iBooks 10 years ago. And they brought them all in, and it was wonderful. It was big news. And they had no curriculum to support it, to speak of, really. Mm-hmm. Or Duke, for example, Duke University got a bunch of iPods for every freshman one year. And they were going to, but they didn't quite figure out what the curricula was like for putting on those iPods to make them support the educational experience.
Yeah, you gotta have a follow through on it.
What you ended up with was a bunch of Duke students who were selling off their iPod for money.
Beer money.
Pretty much.
There you go.
From #1 New York Times bestselling author James Rollins comes the thrilling new novel, The Demon Crown. Often compared to Clive Cussler and Michael Crichton, Rollins combines real science and history with cutting-edge military action. Off the coast of Brazil, a team of scientists discovers a horror like no other, an island where all life has been eradicated, consumed, and possessed by a species beyond imagination. To save mankind's future, the members of Sigma Force must make a devil's bargain and join forces with their most hated enemy, even if it means sacrificing one of their own. This is a great time and a great book to begin joining on the wildly successful Sigma Force series. Rollins' latest Sigma Force novel is one of the best in the series. The mix of science, history, and high-concept adventure is always first-rate in a Rollins novel, says Booklist. Publishers Weekly calls it bone-chilling. Get started with videos, audio, and more at jamesrollins.com. That's JamesRollins.com. Now, Neil, we were talking a while back about the A10 chip that we expected to be in the iMac Pro.
That was the rumor, yeah.
That was what we talked about. And it looks like what's come to light is that the iMac Pro is going to sport a custom chip dubbed the T2.
Right.
And the T2 is going to act as the secure enclave for encrypted keys. It's going to lock down the boot process, handle the system functions like the camera, the audio control, basically all of the functions that we were talking about under that A10 rumor.
Yeah, I think that we're not really going to know what this T2 is until there's a teardown and whatever, because as expected, when we were talking about this before, we were saying if there's an A10, there's something here that we're missing. And I think the thing that we were missing is that it's not really an A10. I think it's probably a very low-power processor. So the T1 chip, the first one that Apple did, came in the 2016 MacBook Pro, and it's a controller that serves as the bridge between the Touch Bar and the Mac OS and Intel processor. Allows them to kind of seamlessly work with one another. And it also handles the Secure Enclave for Apple Pay and Touch ID on the MacBook Pro. Obviously, you don't have Touch ID on an iMac, so what would you use a Secure Enclave for? Well, you use it for storing encrypted information, passwords, that sort of stuff. You also use it for locking down and controlling certain aspects of the hardware and software that you want to make sure are secure, especially if you're a system administrator and you have a iMac Pro that you're buying with sensitive information. You're working on the next Star Wars or something, and you don't want people to, have remote access to your system to leak sensitive information. So what they have is a new secure boot feature, which ensures that everything is up to date and is the proper hardware while it boots to make sure that nothing funny is going on.
No tampering in the firmware, no tampering in the bootloader, because those kinds of things, or tampering in the kernel, because those kinds of things would lead to a machine that boots and allows you to inject or withdraw code, right?
Right. So this locks down the iMac Pro, but it does not require the processing capabilities of an A10 chip, which can run a computer on its own. So,
wait, this goes to the question that was asked by the iPad advertisements not too long ago. What is a computer? Because I would venture to say that this T2 chip acting as the secure enclave is a computer.
What we're talking about it doing is well beneath the capabilities of the A10 processor.
Yes.
The A10 processor is a very complicated chip that is capable of pushing 4K video on the Apple TV, the latest Apple TV, runs the latest iPad Pros in the A10X form. This is a potential Intel replacement on a low-end Mac. This is not something for handling secure boot.
Yes.
Now, so you have to realize that the T1 chip was actually based on the design of what was called the S1P chip, another custom piece of silicon that Apple made for the first generation Apple Watch. So if I had to venture a guess, I would say that the T2 chip is probably built on the dual-core second or third generation chip that Apple has introduced in more recent watches. That would make sense in terms of the processing capabilities of it. It would make sense in terms of the investment to put into it. And it would make sense based on what it does in the machine. Now, if it ends up that it really is an A10 in disguise, then the stuff that we talked about before still remains, and I think that there would be potential for Apple to tap into it for developer-focused stuff in the future. I think that more likely the T2 chip is an extension of the Apple Watch processor and what they've learned from there. I would suspect that you will see it in the MacBook Pro next year. I would suspect that you will see it do some of the things that we talked about potentially being advantageous in a notebook, like low power consumption for certain tasks or background tasks or power nap or that sort of stuff. And obviously the secure boot features that you have on the iMac Pro. But if it's an A10, then it's a Trojan horse, and it's going to do something else in the future. But if it's just this low power Apple Watch extension, then it's not going to do any of that stuff. And that makes sense, because we didn't really understand why they would do an A10, and we were just trying to come up with ideas for it, what would be the purpose of it. The fact that it's a low power chip that handles secure boot, and things that you would want to make sure are secure, like the camera, for example. I mean, even Mark Zuckerberg covers up the camera on his and microphone on his MacBook. I think that that makes sense. That's the kind of stuff that you want to lock down and could end up with a huge security issue if it was exploited. So, it makes sense.
You're going to have the iMac Pro on your desk in a couple days here.
I won't.
No, you won't?
No.
Oh.
I don't have the desk space for it.
First of all, you don't have the desk space for it. No.
27-inch iMac, no.
No.
But yeah, Apple announced after months of waiting, it was announced at WWDC, they said it would ship in June. They announced on Tuesday and that it's going to ship Thursday, which will be the day after people are listening to this, the 14th. And they also sent out some early review units to some video professionals, but also a bunch of YouTubers, which is interesting.
Well, that follows on with the plan that they went with the iPhone, right?
No, actually it doesn't. The iPhone, they invited a handful of YouTubers to go to an office that they have in New York City to film video of the phone, but they didn't get to take one home. Okay. So it was basically Apple was holding the phone and they were like, here's your talking points. Pretty much every video turned out the same because the environment was so controlled. They did send review units to tech professionals, including our own Danielle Aaron Dilger. And we had ours under embargo, like everyone else did. But the iMac Pro we didn't get. And they decided to go with a different market for it. They did send it to one of the developers at Panic. They did send it to a few video professionals who work on feature films in Hollywood, and they sent it to a bunch of YouTubers, which was interesting. One very popular guy, Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, I think he goes by on YouTube. He did a hands-on, and I thought it was very good. And then one of his buddies, some popular YouTuber that I've never heard of, just did this video where he put the iMac Pro on a desk out in front of what looked like a museum somewhere. And it was like, check out my setup. I got some speakers and a desk with colors that match the space gray iMac Pro. And like, that was the entire video. And it was just like these seductive shots of a computer that you can't afford with a desk that you can make installment payments on. And I was just like, what is the point of this video? Who wants to watch this?
I want to see the YouTuber. You've seen this before on occasion, I'm sure, right? I was in a coffee shop a couple of years ago meeting with a friend. And as he and I were sitting down and drinking a cup of coffee and talking, catching up, this guy came in with a CRT tube monitor and a keyboard and a mouse and a tower PC. And he set up on a table his computer, his full-size desktop computer with CRT monitor, not an LCD panel, and proceeded to sit there and camp out and compute at the coffee shop.
Was he playing a LAN game of Unreal Tournament or Quake 3 Arena?
I didn't even look. I couldn't. I was so stunned by the concept that you would cart around a CRT and a tower to your coffee shop. What? I just
he just had to play Command and Conquer Red Alert
pretty much. And so I want to see a YouTuber unbox and bring an iMac
no
Pro
ghosting on that bad boy
to bring the iMac Pro to the coffee shop.
They actually sell a thing. I've seen this product. I don't know if it's for the 27-inch or just for the 21.5-inch, but some company reached out to us a few years ago, and they sell this thing. It's like a bag for your iMac.
Oh, yeah.
So it wraps around and covers the screen, and then it has handles so you can carry it and bring your iMac with you. Why anyone would ever do that, I have no idea. But
I have seen that. They used to, in the dawn of time before there were laptops, you'd have a little sort of a lunch bag that you carried your classic Mac in.
I have been tempted to get an iMac and get one of those, just because I have such limited desk space, get a stand for it and then just have all the desk space underneath it empty.
Oh, the VESA mount. You want to do the VESA mount with the telescoping arm? Yeah,
I think that would be pretty sweet. And I probably end up doing something like that. I'm waiting for the eGPU support in the MacBook Pro and Mac OS High Sierra. I guess it works if you really want to do a second monitor with your iMac or something. The external GPU support, I'm waiting for that to come out of beta next spring. And I suspect that we'll see new MacBook Pros and the official Apple monitor around that time. And I'm really considering dropping some serious coin and getting the official Apple monitor, especially if they do a Retina display in like the 21.5 inch size on a smaller size, comparable to the smaller iMac, the 4K. And then get some sort of a mounting station for the MacBook Pro to clear up some desk space. Get, a Magic Keyboard and a small mouse, take up less desk space. That's what I want to do, have a nice desk, workstation with some GPU horsepower, and then I can undock my MacBook Pro when I really need something on the go and kind of get the best of both worlds.
There are VESA mounts for monitor stands like you're talking about with the two collapsing arms, the pantograph arms, that support dual monitors. So you can reposition your dual monitors and have them float.
I don't want to do dual
desk.
monitors. I'm not interested in that.
Oh, you're just not trying. You give up too soon.
What annoys me and the thing that hurts me the most, and this is what I'm annoyed about with the new iMac Pro as well, is you spend all this money to get a MacBook Pro with Touch Bar. And say what you will about the Touch Bar. The developer support has been lacking. Apple could do a lot more to push it. The fact that they released so remember, there have been no new Pro iMacs released other than the MacBook Pro in the last, 3-4 years, since whenever the Mac Pro was updated, right?
Yes.
The iMac Pro is an entirely new product line. The fact that they introduced the iMac Pro and don't have a touch bar on the keyboard is kind of offensive to me, especially because you can't, if you were to get an external GPU for a MacBook Pro, for example, you have to use a external monitor. You can't do it with the internal monitor. So you either have to clamshell or use your MacBook Pro as a second monitor, which kind of defeats the purpose of having the touch bar because you're looking at a different screen. So I think that, maybe it's battery concerns. Maybe, it's not going to last long enough on a wireless keyboard and they insist on having that Magic Keyboard be wireless or whatever. But I think that they need to have some form of a touch bar option for desktop use.
I understand where you're coming from with that. And we can only wait and see if they actually bring it to fruition.
I think that the iMac Pro is the perfect time to do it. I think an optional, expensive keyboard with touch bar, with built-in Touch ID, its own secure enclave for Apple Pay, and maybe because of battery concerns, it's a wired keyboard. And you don't bundle it with the machine. You make people pay extra for it. And you don't make it your primary way of using it. I think that would be a great option for pro users, and I think it would only help adoption of the touch bar.
I agree. I want to divert a little bit from what we're talking about because I want to let you know and let all our listeners know that iOS 11.2.1 and tvOS 11.2.1 are now available. Mm-hmm. This just happened as we've been talking. And the point about this release is that it includes fixes for HomeKit for shared users. Shared users for HomeKit was temporarily disabled last week to address a vulnerability in the HomeKit framework. Mm-hmm. And this version of the OS updates that. So if you use HomeKit as I and Neil do, this is a good time to update.
Yes. Yeah, that was yet another pretty significant security flaw where people who were not authorized to remotely access your door locks and things like that could. So Apple quickly disabled the capability on their end so that nobody could take advantage of it. But, add it to the long list of software problems that Apple has had recently. Hopefully nobody was actually affected by this. Hopefully it's just, a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of things. But the fact that this was capable in the first place does sow some doubt in the security of HomeKit for people that may be considering adopting it. So let's hope that this is the end of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and this is a small update. The fix is clearly not a large amount of code, right? It's a 57 meg update compared to the gigs of updates that we get for iOS full updates.
Right.
Versus point releases. The thing that I want to say about this, when I first heard about this vulnerability, is that this was the reason that door locks and garage door manufacturers were so slow to implement HomeKit in the first place, because they were very fearful that they would lose control over the ability to secure their product. And their product exists because security.
Right.
When the whole point of your product, a door lock or a garage door, is to secure a premises, and you hand that over to someone else, it's very, very scary. And this was exactly the thing they wanted to avoid. And the compromise for a while under Amazon Alexa was that you could lock things but not unlock them. Mm-hmm. So if something was already unlocked, you could say, hey, Alexa, lock the door, which would be fine because locking it sends it to a secure state, but you couldn't do the reverse.
Right.
And that's really kind of annoying because you who wants the half the solution. With HomeKit, you could do all, full control. And there were people at the time, a couple of years ago, who'd say, but what if you leave your iPad in your house and people shout through the door, "Hey Siri," they can unlock your door. Well, it turned out, no, you can't, because Siri doesn't really pick you up when you're shouting from outside the house.
And it recognizes your voice with some limited biometrics, so it doesn't allow other people to use your devices.
Right. So for a lot of reasons, that was a silly thing to say. But this vulnerability was the one that I think had to have had, people like Kwikset, people like Schlage, people like Chamberlain, the people that make these products that have to be secure, quake a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
On the list of things that doesn't cause people interested in security quiver and quake, Jony Ive has returned to full hands-on control of the Apple design team.
Yeah, supposedly he took some time off to finish the Campus 2 design, and now he's back in charge of where he was. I think that this should put to rest any concerns that he might be imminently leaving the company, as these rumors go around. But
right. The old rumors were that he was leaving. They were that he was distancing himself from design, that he was focused on the software side of things less than the hardware. There were all kinds of concerns about him doing this. And it turns out, in retrospect, do we think he just spent the past 2 years basically doing the campus work?
Probably that and some retail, yeah. I think that they used some of the stuff they learned in the campus design and brought it to new retail stores.
Good. I'm glad he's back on the main job, because I can't wait to see what he does with the car.
Wait, do you think he had a hand?
I'm kidding. I threw that in there.
Do you think he had a hand in designing the black lightning cable that ships with the iMac Pro?
Well, I think he must have, because they had to have gone through 50 iterations of what the reflectiveness and matte finish and gloss finish of the cable and connectors would have been like.
I mean, I'm sure he has input on all this stuff.
What's the durometer of the cable jacket? How does that feel in your hand when you flex it? All of that goes in. That's design. That goes into it.
That was one of the things that people got very excited about with this iMac Pro unboxing that was on YouTube. This black cable, the first time they've done that, an official Apple black cable, $5,000 desktop with up to 18 cores. Cable. And we're talking about a Lightning to USB cable with a full-size USB port too, not even Lightning to USB-C.
What I will say is that we're making fun of the cable design there, but cable design is important.
Oh, absolutely.
I had a Lightning cable that worked with a car charger, and it was a coiled cable, which, the point of a coiled cable is that it collapses upon itself, but you can extend it, right? Seems like a good thing for the car. The people who made this coiled cable did not pay attention to the durometer, which is the flexibility of the jacket. It's how rubbery or how stiff it is. And so the coiled cable was so stiff that you could not practically expand it. If you tried to expand it without holding onto the end of the cable, but you had it plugged into your phone, it would pull itself out of the phone before it would expand.
Oh, jeez. Design.
I'm telling you, design, it matters. No one pays attention to this stuff, but it does make a difference.
Well, Apple is shipping the iMac Pro on time, which is good, unlike the HomePod. They are seeing delays, however, for the 14 and 18 core models. So they have 8 and 10 core options that are going to be shipping as of this week. They didn't even announce a 14-core option. That came through. Marquez Brownlee on YouTube revealed that they're going to have a 14-core option and the 18-core one as well. And one other thing that we found kind of digging around is it looks like these chips are actually underclocked and are custom from what Intel is shipping in terms of getting more overall horsepower with the huge clock configurations that are being done in these desktops. So pretty interesting. The benchmarks show that these things are just monsters. I mean, fastest Mac ever, as you would expect from a $5,000 computer. There was some testing done with the 10-core model, just showing it just blowing away anything prior to it. So pretty exciting for people that are into desktop machines. This is coming with a Final Cut Pro update that's going to have an 8K timeline for messing around with 8K video. And I was talking with some people in the comments the other day. We're talking about, what you would use 8K video for. I don't think that has any practical implication at home. But for editors who are shooting with super high resolution videos, I mean, obviously the editing process is destructive. So as you crop and remove and stuff, you're going to lose some. So having more pixels to work with is always a good thing. I don't think that we're going to see 8K TV screens in our home anytime soon. I don't think there's a real need for that kind of stuff. But certainly for video pros and for the people that are going to be spending $5,000 and up on a desktop, that's a great feature to have and kind of helps future-proof this machine. But yeah, I mean, you're looking at a real workhorse, a really powerful desktop, and it makes me and other people that are into the, as they call them, speeds and feeds, very excited not only for this, but to see what Apple does with the modular Mac Pro next year with a true desktop tower.
That's cool. That's all wonderful, but I want to know is if when the strain relief on the black cable breaks, can I take the lightning cable back to the Apple store and get another black one, or I'm going to have to settle for a white one?
Are they going to have them on stock there behind the Genius Bar?
Okay. It's a problem. It is, you want the black cable. Finisar. Finisar is a firm that makes the VCSEL. That's the vertical cavity surface emitting laser that's used in the iPhone X's true depth camera.
Yeah.
And Apple has gifted Finisar $390 million out of their advanced manufacturing fund. The point of this is to allow Finisar to increase their R&D spend so they can keep working on this and keep working on improving it.
Yeah, and this will help with future augmented reality applications. The expectation is that it won't be next year's iPhone, but the 2019 model, where they'll bring the same technology that's in the true depth camera to the rear camera, and that'll allow for even greater depth sensing and object tracking and that sort of stuff on those cameras. But this kind of investment shows where Apple sees that they have an advantage over the competition, and they're going to invest and continue to try to push forward.
Yeah. The word on Twitter that this is welfare to them. I don't think that it is. I think this is a strategic investment in helping Finisar put together a larger manufacturing plant that is directly related to Apple.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we ought to talk about in terms of Apple spending money is they're acquiring Shazam. So they spent, $400 million?
That's the rumor. We don't know.
Well, it's not, the amount is the rumor, but the acquisition is not.
Yes.
Both Shazam and
they
Apple
did buy
it.
Shazam. What will be interesting to see is whether they keep the Shazam app around or whether they integrate it into Siri or they integrate it into Apple Music. My guess is they'll keep it in Siri and roll it into Apple Music, because if they got rid of the app entirely, that would affect other platforms, namely Android. So I could see where they just roll it into Apple, make it an Apple Music capability.
Right. So the point of acquiring it is that you want to have that functionality in Siri.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have that functionality tie into linking to Apple Music. Right. It formerly linked to iTunes. You could go ahead and Shazam and then buy something on iTunes.
Right.
But having it push to Apple Music and then juice their subscriptions helps a little bit too.
Sure.
Are there other applications for this?
They've been dabbling for a few years in augmented reality and scanning advertisements and stuff, and creating advertisements. So I would imagine that some of the technology and maybe patents that they have in that front might have played a part in this as well.
Right. So one of the things that they had done was when a television commercial plays, if you have Shazam open, that the phone will give you more information or augment that advertisement kind of thing.
Yeah, and ads on the street too. You could hold it up to like something at a bus stop, and then it would not only scan it and display information, but do so in an augmented way that with like ARKit style augmented reality type stuff. So they've been investing in that for a while and saw the potential to kind of scan the world around you and turn objects and things into something more with augmented reality. So given Apple's interest in ARKit, I think that aligns pretty well with where they're looking to go and what they're looking to push into. So, and obviously the fact that they are, one of the biggest music subscription services on the planet doesn't hurt either. They can integrate it into that. So I think it's a good investment all around. It seems to align very well with their business models and their direction.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's all I have for this episode.
All right.
You feel good about that?
I do.
Fantastic. Well, this is Neil Hurt Feelings Hughes. Neil, where can people find you on the internet?
You can read me on AppleInsider, and thank you to all the people who listened last week and tried to perk me up in the comments and and said that they appreciate what we do here. We do read the comments, and we do appreciate you guys weighing in there. You can also tweet at me on Twitter. My handle is @thisisneil, Neil.
And I'm your host, Victor. I'm at vmarks on Twitter, and you can go ahead and find my writings here. I've also been doing an interesting project that I started back in October at tokenreporter.co. Feel free to go ahead and subscribe to that one and check that out. And we will be back with a whole lot more all about Apple and all things related next week on the Apple Insider Podcast.